German authorities have raided the properties of climate change activists across the country. Prosecutors from the southern state of Bavaria ordered the searches, alleging the activists were forming or supporting a criminal organisation. The suspects belong to the Last Generation group, which has gained notoriety due to their increasingly controversial activities, including blocking traffic.
Police search an address in Berlin. It's one of several properties across Germany that's been raided as part of an investigation targeting the climate protest group Last Generation.
The reason for the searches is the accusation of membership or support of a criminal organization against 7 of the accused. The starting point is a fundraising campaign that the accused organized and advertised for the Last Generation, and then also collected a total of 1.4 million euros.
The raids have shocked the group.
They have scared us, but we cannot allow ourselves to be ruled by fear. The German government is knowingly driving us into climate hell. It is even accelerating. We have to continue our resistance.
The climate group came to prominence with a hunger strike in Germany's capital in August 2021, a radical protest by 6 climate activists. For weeks, they camped out near Germany's parliament in Berlin, determined to make climate change top of the political agenda. Since then, Last Generation has grown, both in size and in the tactics it uses. Here, an activist glued herself to the runway at Berlin's airport, forcing officials to temporarily shut it down. Nothing has been off limits. Last October, 2 protesters threw mashed potato at this Claude Monet painting, which was protected by glass in Potsdam's Barberini Museum. The red carpet has also been targeted. In February this year, activists glued themselves to the ground at Berlin's most famous film festival. But while these protests have forced people to stop, they've also caused huge anger as cities like Berlin are regularly brought to a standstill. Over the last year, numerous criminal charges have been filed against members of Last Generation. But activists say nothing will stop them from campaigning against the dangers that climate change brings.
Well, earlier, our chief political correspondent, Nina Haase, explained why Last Generation is being regarded as a criminal organisation by some prosecutors.
Well, the main accusation is that those suspects that I've mentioned have organised a fundraising campaign to finance what the authorities call, quote, further crimes for the Last Generation. They promoted the collection of money via their website. They managed to collect at least 1.4 million euros, and Bavarian authorities say that the money has largely been used to finance, quote, crimes. And in addition, there's also an accusation of attempting to sabotage critical infrastructure. Now, the jury is still out when it comes to the question, is the Last Generation a criminal organisation or not? That is a pretty serious accusation here in Germany. You can get up to 5 years in prison or heavy fines. Groups that have the goal to considerably disrupt public security are considered criminal organizations here. And interestingly, when you look at court rulings here in Germany that dealt with the Last Generation, they're very much divided on that issue. While authorities in southern Germany, but also in Brandenburg, say that the fact that the groups have in the past blocked airports or threatened to sabotage critical infrastructure like oil refineries makes them a criminal organization. The prosecutor here in Berlin just last week said that while the members of the group do commit crimes, there can't be talk of them being a criminal organization, but merely what they did was create constant nuisance.
So let's look at the actions of Last Generation and their means of protest with German climate activist Tadzio Müller. He's not part of Last Generation, but has defended their methods. Welcome to DW, Tadzio. Do you regard Last Generation as a criminal organisation?
Good evening. It's great to see you again. I believe that the crime that is being committed is precisely the one that the Last Generation is pointing attention towards, which is government not staying within its own climate targets. We are violating a number of laws that are on the books. We are violating international promises, and we are breaking international treaties, and we are not fulfilling our own ethical standards regarding global ethical climate governance. It seems to me that those are the primary crimes. I would argue that the acts of the last generation constitute kind of self-defense in the context of a legitimating climate emergency, which you could justify under German Criminal Code Law 34.
Okay, so you would say that they are committing a lesser crime in the face of the massive crime being committed by the German government, and it's for the public good. That would be your mitigation. But and people are going to look at this and ask, well, why not target the polluters? Why not target the oil companies or indeed the government that they hold responsible for these massive crimes, as you would have it? Why not target them rather than hardworking people who are just trying to get to work?
Now, I have to say this as somebody who's been a climate activist for 15 years. All those things that folks, very well-meaning folks, are saying we should now be doing, targeting polluters, targeting political parties and decision makers, that's what we've been doing for 15 years. The anti-coal movement in Germany, Ende Gelände, for example, this disobedient campaign that I was part of organizing, very much went to the places of destruction, to coal pits and coal-fired power, and shut them down. We put pressure on the Greens around Lützerath, the village that was destroyed in Western Germany in January. We have, in fact, even had soft majorities for protecting the climate. But the point is, once it comes to actually doing stuff that really protects the climate, which would also negatively impact some of the material wealth and comfort we have accumulated here in the global north through processes that have destroyed the planet, then folks tend to back away from supporting climate goals. And so the things you should be doing, we have done. They haven't led to the climate being protected. And the last generation is simply escalating its pressure on a society that clearly has decided to not.
Let me just interrupt you there, but I mean, is that an escalation? Is blocking roads for commuters an escalation, or is it going for softer targets? The politicians haven't listened for 15 years. The oil companies haven't listened for 15 years. How is targeting people trying to put bread on the table in these terrible cost of living times, how is that going to make achieve the objective of bringing about a change in government policy?
We actually have historical experiences from social movements in the past. If I can refer to Emily Pankhurst, the leader of the British suffragette, one of the leaders of the British suffragette. She and the British suffragette movement is actually famous not just for the non-violent civil disobedience, like throwing themselves in front of but also firebombing mailboxes in London and burning down the summer house of the Prime Minister. I'm not saying the climate movement should be doing that sort of thing, but when asked to justify those acts, Emily Pankhurst said, at some point, because society wasn't listening, they had to start disrupting the normality of that society in order to force it to listen. And the idea here is that you, as a social movement, and I can say this also as a movement researcher, if you are faced with societies and or elites that are unwilling to transform, and in this case fulfill a promise that has been made in a legally binding way at a global level, fulfill the promises of the Paris Agreement. If we are faced with a society that doesn't want to do these things, then we have to start increasing the pressure on society as we're increasing the cost.
Okay. So campaigners... Okay, so campaigners have been at this for 15 years at least. Now that they are going to these extremes of gluing themselves to roads and locking on, as they have it in the UK, should campaigners who cause damage be liable for the damage that they cause with their glued hands, which have to be dug out of the street? Or indeed for the losses to companies whose cargoes end up getting lost or being spoiled because of their actions?
Again, I have to point out that I believe that the law-breaking committed by the climate movement, and it's of course not only the last generation, other disobedient campaigns have also made, the law-breaking that is committed that is done by the climate movement is a form of self-defense. Is in fact engaging in reasonable and rational behavior in the context of climate emergency, which, remember, our governments are driving forward, right? Governments around the European Union are currently, and especially the German government, are expanding LNG infrastructure. So that's fossil fuel infrastructure that is being built in the middle of the climate emergency. We've got floods in Somalia. We've got floods in Italy. We've got the heat wave in South Asia. We've got Montevideo will have no water for its citizens in Now, while this is happening, the German government is expanding LNG infrastructure, which, I'm sorry, all that stuff about green hydrogen is utter twaddle. And because for the time being, they're building infrastructure where they're going to burn fossil gas in the middle of the climate emergency. We are trying to prevent that sort of thing happening. The last generation is fighting for a speed limit, a very simple way to reduce emissions, to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Now, the law breaking is a legitimate form of self-defense in the context of the climate emergency.
And that point you have made well and clearly. All right, thank you for that. Climate activist Tadzio Muller, thank you so much for joining the day, and apologies to our viewers for some of the poor quality of the sound there.
Sorry about that.
Well, Nana Maria Gröning is a molecular biologist and member of Scientists Rebellion. That's a separate international scientists environmentalist group. She joins us from Berlin. Welcome to DW. How do you feel about these raids against Last Generation?
Well, I'm angry because it is so disproportional, so it is so off scale and an unreasonable reaction to peacefully protesting people.
Right. The authorities have said that they suspect them of effectively being organised criminals. So if they don't arrest them, what should they do?
They should talk to them and, do more serious climate action, because if they would just do what they actually signed for already in the Paris Agreement or what's in the Constitution, so they are actually obliged to protect our lives and our futures, if they would just do their job, then the protests would stop immediately. And it's a fact that governments of the global north, including the German one, are not nearly doing enough to protect us from climate breakdown, which is escalating day by day.
Okay,
so
I mean, that's the argument of the campaigners, and there's a lot of support for it. But on this specific point, if authorities suspect that these people are breaking the law, you say they shouldn't arrest them. You say the politicians should change their policies. While the law is as it is, what should they do about people suspected of acting in this way?
Well, it's a different thing of saying they're a criminal organization and just bringing them to court and giving them charges for what they're doing. You know, civil disobedience it has in its core the symbolic breaking of laws. And criminal organizations, they operate in secret and run away from their charges. And that is the complete opposite of what Last Generation is doing. They are very transparent and they're going to court for what they're doing.
We're going to look now at pictures of you being removed from a sit-down demonstration in the street. And when people see these pictures and see people like Last Generation doing these things, they always ask themselves, well, one of the questions they ask themselves is, do these protests actually have any effect? Have they ever changed government policy?
Well, they keep the topic on the agenda. We're now talking about it. And we live in a time where crises are in competition to each other. You know, we have the energy crisis, the war, and so on and so forth. But the climate crisis is so big, we need to keep talking about it. And these disruptive protests...
Forgive me for interrupting you. Time is short. We have to keep talking about it, and clearly that is one of the things that happens. But is there any evidence that these sort of protests have actually done any good, have changed the law anywhere?
Well, in history, certainly, like the civil rights movement...
Protests. No, I'm talking about the climate protests. Have climate protests, such as the ones that you've taken part in and the ones that these other people have organised, is there any evidence anywhere in the world that they have changed anything?
Well, yeah, obviously we cannot expect it to be successful in a short period of time. But for example, at Schiphol Airport in Amsterdam, where climate activists like Scientists Rebellion, Greenpeace and others blocked Schiphol Airport and demanded a ban on private jets, they now decided to not have private jets anymore at Schiphol Airport.
OK. Thank you so much for that, molecular biologist and climate campaigner, Anna Maria Gruening. Thank you.